It's a minute before 2 o'clock. You're listening to VPR. Stay with us for Here and Now. Also, a news update from NPR and VPR. Support from Rabble Rouser, presenting artist Sarah Grace on stage Thursdays in December. And from her home until then, 7:30 tonight, rabblerouser.net. And the Swedish Pit, the Volvo specialist, where Volvo means rolling, and keeping Vermont Volvos on the road. 863-2646.
This is Vermont Public Radio.
WRVT Rutland at 88.7.
WBTN Bennington at 94.3.
WVBA Brattleboro at 88.9.
WVPR Windsor at 89.5.
WVPA St. Johnsbury at 88.5.
WVPS Burlington at 107.9.
In Manchester at 106.9.
And at VPR.org.
Funding for Here and Now comes from MathWorks, creators of MATLAB and Simulink software, accelerating the pace of engineering and science. Learn more at mathworks.com.
From NPR and WBUR Boston, I'm Robin Young.
I'm Jeremy Hobson. It's Here and Now. Coming up, nearly 3.2 million more people filed for unemployment last week, but economist Gene Sperling says the most important metric right now should be economic dignity.
When you see people being ordered back to reopen the economy without regard for their PPE, whether they're safe, they're being denied that sense of dignity.
Also, the CEO of Levi Strauss looks into the future of retail, protection for workers and customers.
We will have specific procedures for a product that's tried on. If a consumer doesn't buy that product, we will quarantine it for 24 hours.
And evidence of a swimming dinosaur that was bigger than a T-Rex. Coming up, Here and Now.
The news is first.
Live from NPR News, I'm Lakshmi Singh. House Democrats are releasing details of what they want to see in the next coronavirus relief package. NPR's Windsor Johnston reports Congress has so far passed more than $3 trillion in federal assistance to address the economic ravages of a U.S. outbreak that's put more than 30 million Americans out of work.
House Democrats are calling for the next aid package to include additional money for state and local governments, workplace protections for essential employees, and funding to increase the capacity for coronavirus testing. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi says she's waiting for Republicans to get on board in the negotiations.
We have to start someplace, and rather than starting in a way that does not meet the needs of the American people, we want to set a standard. And again, we need a presidential signature, so at some point we'll have to come to agreement.
House Republicans warn against acting prematurely on the next round of coronavirus relief aid. Democrats say a vote could come as early as next week. Windsor Johnston, NPR News, Washington.
The economic urgency is in the numbers. Some 33.5 million people have put in for unemployment assistance in just the last 7 weeks. More than 3 million last week alone. When the April jobs report comes out tomorrow, it's expected to show a 15 or 16% unemployment rate, the highest since the Great Depression. NPR's Jim Zaroli says some places are feeling it more acutely than others.
Where you live can determine how you fare when you don't have a job. States like Massachusetts are pretty generous with benefits. Florida is not. People really have to jump through hoops to get benefits. And even if you do qualify, the amount of money you get is low. It's on average $250 a week.
NPR's Jim Zaroli reporting. A U.S. military aide who works at the White House has tested positive for coronavirus. NPR's Franco Ordonez reports President Trump and Vice President Pence have since been tested.
The positive case of someone working close to President Trump immediately raised concerns about the president's possible exposure to the virus. Spokesman Hogan Gidley says the White House medical unit notified officials that a member of the U.S. military who works on the White House campus had tested positive for the coronavirus. Gidley says since learning of the aide's positive result, President Trump and Vice President Pence have both been tested. He says both tested negative for the virus and remain in, quote, great health. Franco Ordonez, NPR News.
California is confirming that COVID-19 has claimed the life of the first immigrant in U.S. detention. Immigration and Customs Enforcement has not provided details on the 57-year-old patient at the Otay Mesa facility in San Diego. 132 people at the site reportedly have tested positive. Overall, roughly 30,000 people are in custody of immigration enforcement. This is NPR News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Noom, a personalized weight loss program designed to give people knowledge to set new goals and the tools to stick to them for good. Learn more at Noom, Noom.com, and the Annie E. Casey Foundation.
Good afternoon, 2:04. I'm Jake Rusnock with VPR News. The Vermont Health Department reports 8 new cases of COVID-19 today, bringing the total number to 916. And another death was reported, putting Vermont's death toll at 53. There are currently 5 people hospitalized with COVID-19 in the state. More than 18,000 tests have been administered and 718 people have recovered from the disease. Local dairy farmers and milk processors have teamed up to provide several truckloads of milk and yogurt for the Vermont Food Bank. With schools and restaurants closed during the pandemic, some farmers have been forced to dump their milk as demand plummeted. Diane Bothfeld at the State Agency of Agriculture says the milk donation won't fully ease the surplus, but the milk won't go to waste, and she says farmers will get paid for it.
Dairy farmers are taken care of, the processing facilities are taken care of, and the food bank gets the product. So a triple win across the board.
The dairy products were purchased with the help of a $60,000 grant from the Vermont Community Foundation. Bothfeld said the initial donation includes 11,500 gallons of milk and 42,000 cups of yogurt. And new guidance from the Agency of Agriculture will bring some added variety to farmers markets in Vermont. Abby Willard with the agency says vendors can now sell non-edible products.
So that means that they can do crafts, they can do non-edible farm products, so beeswax candles, goat's milk soap.
Markets have previously been restricted to selling only edible farm products. The restriction was intended to limit foot traffic and slow the spread of COVID-19. One more story, a 3.7 magnitude earthquake shook southern Quebec yesterday, north of the Vermont border. CTV News quotes Canadian officials who said there were no reports of damage from the quake, although residents said their houses shook. Time is 2:06. The eye on the sky, partly cloudy, widely scattered showers this afternoon. Highs mid-50s to mid-60s, clouds and scattered rain showers tonight, perhaps a snow shower over higher terrain, lows upper 20s to mid-30s. More on the weather at vpr.org. I'm Jake Rusnock with VPR News.
From NPR and WBUR, I'm Jeremy Hobson.
I'm Robin Young. It's Here and Now. And today the Labor Department said that another 3.2 million Americans filed for unemployment benefits last week, bringing the total since March to more than 33 million. In a moment, we'll hear from the CEO of Levi Strauss about the effect of the pandemic on retail.
But first, President Trump is moving forward with a message that it's time to reopen the economy, even as the number of new coronavirus cases continues to climb. About half of governors are cautiously opening their states for business. Joining us now is Jeffrey Shaman, professor of environmental health sciences at Columbia University. Professor, welcome back.
Thank you. Thanks for having me again.
Well, and rather than start with the news, let me ask you a question that may be on a lot of people's minds as they see the country start to open up. Is it okay if you have been an excellent social distancer, you haven't even left your house maybe, to go visit your mom this weekend for Mother's Day?
Well, you know, I think that is a question that everybody would like to know the answer to, and it's very hard to give a specific answer. The reason is that the virus is still circulating in many communities, and that means that it's moving around, and no matter how many reported cases you hear in a particular county, you really probably should multiply that by about 30 to 40, and those would be the number of people who are out there who have the virus and are contagious at this particular time. So if you hear in your community that there are 100 cases, let's say in the city or town or county in which you live, it's really more like 3,000 to 4,000 people are currently contagious with the virus. That's a rough estimate. Yeah, really. Now, if you've been completely sequestered and your mother has too, and you want to go see her, there's probably not a high risk of doing so, but you can't say that there is no risk. And if your mother is somebody who has diabetes or hypertension or heart disease, it might be best not to do it.
But you do see.
我看右边那出租车不但戴着口罩，还戴着一个面罩呢。
We all wish we could go back to normal. And there's going to be, you know, not only is there an economic toll associated with the shutdown and shelter in place, but there's a real psychological and emotional toll. And it's not something that we look at as being sustainable. We have to find a way to allow ourselves to emerge out and to have some level of interaction, but we have to figure out what that level of interaction is that is as safe as possible. And it doesn't mean tossing the economy over and putting everybody in their homes and making us stay there for a year. But we really need testing and contact tracing capacity so that we can squeeze out this disease more. And there may be some combination of measures that we have to take, like ultimately, if you can go out and visit your family, you do it with social distancing practices. Maybe everybody wears a mask.
What would you say to our listeners who live in a state where things are opening up? In Texas, you can go to a movie theater right now. You can go to restaurants as long as you stay a certain distance apart and wear a mask. If you live in a state where it is legal now to do that, or it's acceptable to do that, would you say that it's a wise move to participate in that?
You know, I would say that for some states, they're in a much better position to do that than others. Places like Wyoming and Alaska, they have very low incidence of the disease. Texas is not positioned that way right now. And they've had cases that have been increasing over the last few days, and that's potentially problematic. So the issue here is, if you're loosening restrictions and people are coming together in theaters, are you actually giving the virus more opportunities to transmit? Now, if everybody sits 6 feet apart and everybody wears masks and nobody violates those kinds of rules, it might be a relatively safe environment. But there may not be 100% compliance with that, and there may be opportunities for spreading events, even super spreading events.
Professor, how is it possible that after we basically shut the country down for almost 2 months, closed the borders to other countries, very little air travel going on, that we're still seeing so many deaths per day?
It's because we haven't done it quite the way that would work best. We haven't done it in an optimal way. I personally think that if we look at the model of what was done in South Korea, which has had a very effective track record of really throttling the disease within their country while trying to keep their economy open. They've reopened churches, they've started baseball, albeit to empty stadiums, but they've done the best job of threading this needle. They haven't actually shut any businesses along the way of doing that. And what they've done is they've encouraged face mask use, and they've aggressively tested and contact traced. That's a very powerful control measure that we haven't been able to effect in this country. And I think that's one of the reasons why it's really run through us and continues to do so.
That is Jeffrey Shaman, who's a professor of environmental health sciences at Columbia University. Professor, thanks as always for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Jeremy.
Well, more economic news today. Neiman Marcus became the first department store to file for bankruptcy during this pandemic, and some say the outbreak will change the landscape of retail forever. What does Chip Berg think? He's CEO of the 167-year-old Levi Strauss Company. And Chip, you've said that over 167 years, your company has survived it all, including the Spanish flu of 1918. So how is this hitting you?
It's having a real epic impact on retail, and I do believe that it is fundamentally going to change the face of retail. There will be fewer stores, I'm confident. Our strategy, though, for the last 7 years has been to shift the business away from the U.S. and away from U.S. wholesale. You know, think Macy's, Kohl's, JCPenney, Sears, all of those kind of wholesale customers. So 8+ years ago when I got here, 60% of our business was in the U.S. and almost 50% was in U.S. wholesale. Today, less than 45% of our total business is in the U.S. and less than 30% of it is in U.S. wholesale. We'll just continue to double down on the things that are working for us. And I'm convinced we're going to come out of this even stronger than when we went in.
Well, and, you know, you may have to say that, right? I mean, you have to be the voice of optimism to pull this, you know, company and its investors and, you know, customers behind you. But, you know, the data firm Amperity has some pretty bleak figures. They say demand for food and health-related items is strong, but apparel, no, demand is down 57%. People don't have the income they had. They've lost their jobs. How are you going to get around some of those concerns? Start with the consumer.
We are already experiencing and now have more than a month of experience in China as consumers have kind of come back out from hibernation. We also have an e-commerce business, and I will say that our e-commerce business around the world has been strong through the pandemic. So there's no question in the short term we're going to take a revenue hit because in the month of April, 75% of our stores globally were closed and most of our wholesale customers were closed. But the brand really resonates with young consumers, and one of the things that we're seeing is young consumers really do want to get back out and start socializing again and start going back to the stores. In fact, we've had some stores in Europe that have done really well on the very first day that they opened. And when consumers do come back, they're going to reach for the brands that they know and that they trust.
What about your workers? You had to furlough 4,000 workers. You've publicly taken a 50% pay cut. Those are your store workers. I'm thinking of your supply chain as well. 99% of your jeans are made in China, Japan, Italy. How do you keep them safe?
We put our people first. Our stores here in the U.S., we closed them before any government authority asked us to close our stores. And we continued to pay those hourly employees for a full month. And when the Government Care Act came into place, that was the point in time when we determined to furlough them. So our hourly employees were kept whole through a combination of unemployment and the CARES Act.
Well, let's talk about the two different kinds of workers. How do you keep workers in the stores safe?
Yeah, and again, we're learning a lot from China. Our employees will have PPE, they'll have masks, we'll have hand sanitization, and we will have specific procedures for a product that's tried on. If a consumer doesn't buy that product, we will quarantine it for 24 hours. There will be visible cleaning happening in the stores at all times. And we'll be limiting the number of consumers that can come into the stores. We'll offer buy online, pick up in store. If there are lines outside the door, we'll encourage people to order online and we'll bring the product out to them. We're trying to be as safe as possible and as practical as possible without putting our employees in a position of compromising their own health and safety.
And what about the workers, the people around the world? Some of these factories are not great on a good day, and now we're in a pandemic.
Right. So very early in this, we created a $3 million philanthropic fund. $1 million is going to support the communities in areas where we have large supply chain presence around the world. And the economic impact, as tough as it's been here in the U.S., you can imagine how hard it is in places like Bangladesh and other parts of Asia. And then we have an organization, it was actually the first employee-driven nonprofit organization to support other employees and retirees when they hit a financial hardship. We started this almost 40 years ago. We now have a playbook and we're open sourcing it to other companies as they wrestle with the same thing. We wanted that foundation to be well funded to support our employees and retirees.
That's Chip Berg, CEO of Levi Strauss. Chip, thank you so much, and as we say to everybody trying to make it through this pandemic, best of luck to you.
Thank you very much, Robin. It's been nice chatting with you.
And you're listening to Here Now. I'm Chris from Bristol Electronics. It really feels good that we're supporting VPR because it's the kind of content that we like to listen to. The content isn't dramatized, it's just good content. It feels like when you go in and sit down and have a conversation. And when someone calls our office, we want to make them feel like they're coming in, sitting down and having a conversation. VPR makes us feel that way. We want to support that.
Find more information about underwriting Vermont Public Radio at vpr.org/support.
I'm Jack Lepiarz. U.S. unemployment figures are showing no signs of letting up. Labor Department figures show nearly 3.2 million people filed for unemployment last week, bringing the total over the past 7 weeks to more than 33 million. Federal authorities are set to release a more complete look at the April unemployment situation tomorrow. Amid a debate in Washington over a bailout for states, California's governor is predicting a $54 billion deficit this year because of the coronavirus outbreak. It's almost a quarter of the state's annual budget and a sharp turnaround from a $21 billion surplus a year ago. The White House says President Trump and Vladimir Putin discussed arms control and the coronavirus on a call today. The White House says the president offered coronavirus assistance to the Russian leader and suggested arms control
刚才在蒙特利尔的朋友看到那个加拿大皇家空军的飞机编队没有？飞行表演。我今天出来主要就是来拍那个的，拍了几个镜头，晚上给它发到我的频道。对，剪头发了，剪了好几次了，都自己剪的啊。自己的头自己理多了就简单了，就知道怎么理了，就快了。熟能生巧嘛，是吧？好了，回家，回头再聊啊，先到这儿。